Welcome to English Podcast.
I am Lisa.
And I'm Eric. Do you want to improve your English easily? If so, you're in the right place.
So let's get started and make English learning easy. Well, Eric, what's on our list for today?
The first word today is accurate. Then we will continue with nevertheless and to wonder. Then to call off. And the final one is get your act together.
Okay, let's start with the first word.
Sure, Lisa. The first word of today is accurate.
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 Accurate is an adjective, and it means something that is correct, exact, or without any mistakes. If something is accurate, it's very close to the truth.
Exactly. You can use accurate to describe information, measurements, or even people's actions when they are done correctly. Let's look at our first example sentence to understand better. The weather report was accurate, and it rained as predicted.
It means that the weather report was correct, and the rain happened just like the report.
Now, here's another example. The map was accurate, so we found the place easily.
It means that the map was correct and had no mistakes, which helped them find the place without any problems.
Yes, Lisa. Let's talk a little more about the word accurate. When you need to pay attention to details like calculations or giving directions, being accurate is very important.
And accurate is commonly used with words like information, data, and details. It's a word that you'll hear in both formal and informal situations, especially when being correct is the key.
Absolutely. Now, let's listen to a short dialogue to show how accurate can be used in a conversation.
We need to make sure all the data in the report is accurate before we send it to the client.
I agree. If the information isn't accurate, it could cause problems later. Let's double-check everything to be sure.
Good idea. An accurate report will help us avoid any mistakes.
In the dialogue, David and Sarah wanted to be sure the data in their report was accurate.
Yes, and this shows that accurate is often used when you want to emphasize the importance of being correct. People use this word to talk about things that need to be exact.
Eric, do you think accurate is a common word in English?
It's quite common, especially in professional settings. You'll hear it a lot when people are talking about making sure things are done right, whether it's in work, school, or even everyday tasks.
I agree. Because being accurate is important in many situations. When you want to describe something that is correct and free from mistakes, you can use the word accurate.
Absolutely, Lisa. Well, that wraps up our discussion on the word accurate. We hope our listeners found it useful.
I hope so, Eric. All right, let's move on to our next word.
Our next word is nevertheless.
Nevertheless.
Nevertheless. The word nevertheless is an adverb. It is used to show contrast. It means in spite of that or however. We use it when we want to add information that contrasts with what was just said. For example, you may say one thing, but then you use nevertheless to show something different or surprising.
Exactly, Eric. Now, let's give 2 example sentences to help everyone understand it better.
Sure, here's my example. It was raining. Nevertheless, we decided to go for a walk. It means that even though it was raining, we still chose to walk. The word nevertheless shows that we did something unexpected because of the rain.
That's a good example, Eric. My example is, she was tired. Nevertheless, she finished her homework. It means that even though she was tired, she still completed her homework. Nevertheless shows the contrast between being tired and finishing the homework.
Good example, Lisa. Now, let's give an example dialogue to show nevertheless in conversation.
The deadline is very close. We only have 2 days left.
Yes, it's true. Nevertheless, I believe we can finish the project on time.
I hope so. Nevertheless, we need to focus and work hard to make it happen.
Absolutely. Let's give it our best effort.
That dialogue shows how, nevertheless, it can be used to connect different ideas, even when they seem to go against each other.
Yes, and it's a very useful word when you want to sound more formal or when you're writing something important. Lisa, do you think nevertheless is a common word?
I think it's not used as often in everyday conversation, but it's definitely common in written English, especially in essays, reports, or formal emails. It's good to know because it helps you make your writing or speech clearer and more sophisticated.
That's true. If you want to impress someone with your English, using it nevertheless is a good way to do it. Just remember to use it when you want to connect two ideas that contrast with each other. And it's easy to learn it. The more you use it, the easier it becomes.
Good tip, Eric. Well, that's all for today's word, nevertheless. We hope you understand it better now and feel confident using it. Okay, shall we move on to the next word, Eric?
Let's do it, Lisa. The next word we're going to explain is wonder.
Wonder.
Wonder. Wonder is a verb that means to think about something because you are curious or want to know more about it. When you wonder, you are asking yourself a question or thinking deeply about something.
Exactly, Eric. You can use wonder when you're unsure about something and you're thinking about the answer. Let's look at our first example sentence. I wonder what time the movie starts.
It means that the person is thinking about or trying to guess what time the movie will begin. They don't know the exact time, so they are curious about it.
Right. Here's another example. She wondered if she had locked the door before leaving the house. It means that she was trying to remember whether she locked the door or not. She's not sure, so she's asking herself this question.
Let's talk a little more about the word wonder. Wonder is often followed by words like if, what, who, where, or why, because it's usually connected to asking questions in your mind. For example, I wonder if it will rain today, or I wonder why he didn't call.
Perfect, Eric. And wonder is a very common word that you'll hear in everyday conversation. It's used when people are curious or thinking about something they are not sure about.
Absolutely. Now, let's do a short dialogue to show how wonder can be used in a conversation.
I wonder if it's going to be sunny tomorrow. I want to go to the beach.
Me too. I am just wondering what we should pack for the trip. Do you think we need sunscreen?
Definitely. But I also wonder if it might rain later in the day. Maybe we should bring an umbrella just in case.
In the dialogue, Alex and Maria are both thinking about the weather and what they need to pack for their trip, so they're using wonder to express their curiosity.
Yes, and this shows that wonder is a great word to use when you're thinking about different possibilities.
Eric, do you think wonder is a common word in English?
Yes, it's very common. As you said just before, especially in everyday conversation, people often use wonder when they're thinking out loud about something they don't know. It's a simple way to express curiosity or to start a discussion about something unknown.
I agree. So remember, when you're curious about something or thinking about a question, you can use the word wonder. Okay, Eric. Let's continue with the next word.
The next word we're going to explain is call off.
Call off.
Call off. Call off is a phrasal verb, and it means to cancel something, like a meeting, event, or plan. When you call off something, it means you decide that it won't happen as planned.
You can use call off when you decide to stop an event or activity. Let's look at our first example sentence. They had to call off the soccer game because of the snow. It means that the soccer game was canceled because it was snowing, so the players couldn't play.
Here's another example. The teacher decided to call off the test because many students didn't come to the school. It means that the teacher canceled the test because there were not enough students in the class for the test. Let's talk a little more about the phrase call off. It's important to know that call off is always followed by the thing that is being cancelled, like a meeting, event, or plan. For example, you can say, call off the party, call off the meeting, or call off the trip.
Good tip, Eric. Now let's do a short dialogue to show how call off can be used in a conversation.
Did you hear? They decided to call off the meeting this afternoon.
Really? Why did they call it off?
I think the boss is out of town, so they had to cancel it.
That makes sense. I'm kind of glad they called it off. I needed more time to prepare.
In the dialogue, Mike and Sarah discussed that their meeting was canceled, and Mike explained that it was because the boss was out of town.
Yes, and this shows that call off is a simple and clear way to say that something won't happen as planned.
Eric, do you think call off is a common phrase in English?
It's very common, especially in everyday conversation. People often use call off when talking about plans that change, such as canceling events, meetings, or appointments.
I agree. So remember, when you need to cancel a plan or event, you can use the phrase call off. Well, I think we have explained call off fairly enough. And now it is time to explain the last word of today. What is the last word, Eric?
The last word today is get your act together.
Get your act together.
Get your act together. This is an informal phrase that means to organize yourself and improve your behavior or work. It's often used when someone needs to become more responsible or efficient. Let's look at some examples. Would you want to give the first example, Lisa?
Sure. Here's the first example. John needs to get his act together if he wants to pass the exam. This means that John must start studying harder and be more organized to pass the exam.
Here's another example. I was always late, but I got my act together, and now I'm on time. It means that the person used to be late often, but they improved their behavior, and now they're punctual.
Good example, Eric. Now let's listen to a short dialogue using get your act together.
Sarah, your room is a mess again.
I know, Mom. I'll clean it later.
You need to get your act together. This can't go on.
Okay, Mom. I'll start organizing my things now.
That's better. If you get your act together, you'll feel much better too.
In this dialogue, we heard get your act together used twice. They were used to encourage Sarah to be more organized. Okay, now let's talk more about this phrase. Eric, is get your act together a formal or informal phrase?
It's definitely informal, Lisa. We wouldn't use it in professional settings or with people we don't know well.
That's right. When would you typically use this idiom, Eric?
You might use it with friends or family when you want to encourage them to improve something.
Good point. Do you think it's useful to know?
Yes, it's a common way to tell someone they need to make changes in a friendly way.
I agree. Any tips for our listeners on how to use it correctly, Eric?
Remember, it's informal and can sound a bit strong. Use it carefully and with people you're close to.
Great advice, Eric. All right, I think we have reached the end of our podcast today. We hope you liked our podcast and learned some new words.
Thank you for watching and listening, and don't forget to like our podcast. See you in the next video.
Bye. I am Lisa.
And I'm Eric. Do you want to improve your English easily? If so, you're in the right place.
So, let's get started and make English learning easy. So, Eric, what's on our list for today?
The first word today is relevant. Then we will continue with handy and make ends meet. Then turn down. And the final one is the last straw.
Okay, let's start with the first word.
The first word today is relevant.
Relevant.
Relevant. Relevant is an adjective. It means connected to the subject you are talking or thinking about. When something is relevant, it is important or closely related to the topic.
For example, if you're discussing a historical topic, information about ancient Rome would be relevant. However, a fact about cooking might not be relevant. Now, let's give 2 example sentences to help everyone understand it better. Could you give us an example sentence, Eric?
Sure, Lisa. Here's my example. The teacher asked for relevant questions about the lesson. It means that the teacher wants questions that are connected to the lesson, not about something different.
Good example, Eric. Now, my turn. When writing an essay, it is important to write relevant information. This means that when you write an essay, you should only add information that is related to the topic. Irrelevant information, which is the opposite of relevant, is not needed.
That's right. And here's a quick note. When using relevant, we often follow it with to. For example, relevant to the topic or relevant to our discussion. This shows what it is connected to.
That's helpful, Eric. Now, let's give an example dialogue to show relevant in conversation.
Mike, do you think this chapter is relevant to our exam?
Yes, it is very relevant. The teacher said most questions will be from this chapter.
Okay, then we should focus on the most relevant parts first.
I agree. Let's start with the main topics.
That was a nice example, Eric. I like how they talked about relevant when studying for an exam.
Yes, Lisa. Relevant is a great word when we want to talk about things that are important or connected to what we are talking about. Now, let's discuss why relevant is a useful word. Lisa, what do you think?
I think relevant is very useful because it helps us communicate clearly. We often need to know what is important or connected to a topic. This word helps us to say that directly.
Absolutely. And relevant is a word that is used in both formal and informal settings. You can hear it in schools, offices, and even in everyday conversations.
Yes, I agree. It's very common and easy to use. Well, that's all for today's word, relevant. We hope our listeners found it helpful and easy to understand. Let's move on to our next word, Eric.
The second word we are going to explain is handy.
Handy.
Handy. The word handy is an adjective. It means something that is useful or easy to use. If something is handy, it can help you in a situation or it is convenient to have.
Exactly, Eric. Handy is often used to describe tools, objects, or even people who are skillful with their hands. Now, let's give 2 example sentences to help everyone understand better.
Sure. Here's my example. This small knife is very handy for camping. It means that the knife is very useful when you go camping. You can use it for many things while camping.
Great example, Eric. Now, my turn. It's always handy to have a pen in your bag. It means that having a pen in your bag is very useful. You might need to write something down, and a pen can help you.
Good one, Lisa. Now, let's move on to a short dialogue to show handy in a conversation.
Mike, do you have a bottle opener? I can't open this bottle.
Sure. Here you go. This small one is really handy. I carry it on my keychain.
Wow, that is handy. Do you always have it with you?
Yes, it's perfect for situations like this.
That was a good example. It shows how a small thing can be very handy in everyday life. So, Eric, what would you say about the word handy?
Well, Lisa, I think handy is a good word because it can describe so many things: tools, objects, or even people who are good at fixing things. It's a word we use often in daily life.
I agree. Handy is also a friendly and informal word. You can use it in conversations with friends, family, or coworkers.
Yes, that's a good point. It's an easy word to use and it makes your English sound more natural. So I encourage our listeners to learn handy.
I agree. All right, I think we have explained handy fairly enough. We hope you find this word, well, handy. Okay, let's continue with the next word, Eric.
The next word is make ends meet.
Make ends meet.
Make ends meet. Make ends meet is an idiom that means to have just enough money to pay for the main things you need, like food, rent, or bills.
When someone says they are trying to make ends meet, it usually means they don't have a lot of money and are finding it difficult to pay for everything. Eric, could you give us an example sentence?
Sure. Here's my example. Jane works 2 jobs to make ends meet. It means that Jane has to work 2 jobs to earn enough money for her daily expenses.
Great example, Eric. Now, my turn. Even with careful planning, it's hard to make ends meet on a small salary. It means that even if you are careful with money, it is still difficult to pay for everything when you don't earn much.
Good example, Lisa. Now, let's move to a short dialogue to show how to use make ends meet in a conversation.
How are you doing, Mark? You look tired.
Oh, I'm okay. Just working extra to make ends meet.
I understand. It's tough these days. I'm also looking for a part-time job to help make ends meet.
Yes, every bit helps. Hopefully, things will get better soon.
That was a useful but sad example.
Yes, it is. It shows that making ends meet might be difficult sometimes.
I agree. Okay, what would you say about the idiom, Eric?
Well, it's a very common phrase, especially when times are tough. I think make ends meet is a useful phrase because it describes a situation many people experience. It's a practical and useful idiom when talking about financial difficulties.
I completely agree. And make ends meet is quite common in both everyday conversations and news stories. It's an important phrase to know if you want to understand English better.
Absolutely, Lisa. It's always good to know phrases like this, especially if you want to connect with others and talk about real-life situations.
I agree, Eric. So, listeners, you can use make ends meet when you want to talk about managing your budget.
Great advice, Lisa. And that's it for the word make ends meet.
Okay, Eric, shall we move on to the next word?
Let's do that. The next word is turn down.
Turn down.
Turn down. Turn down is a phrasal verb that has 2 common meanings. The first meaning is to reject or refuse something, like a job offer or an invitation. The second meaning is to reduce the level of something, like the volume on a radio or the heat on a stove.
So if you turn down an offer, you mean no to it. And if you turn down the volume, you make it quieter. Let's give some examples. Eric, could you go first?
Sure. Here's the first example. She turned down the job offer because it was too far from home. It means that she refused or rejected the job offer because the location was not close to her home.
Right. Here's another example. He asked her to go to the movies, but she turned him down because she had other plans. It means that she refused his invitation to the movies because she already had something else to do.
Good examples. Now, a quick note on grammar. Turn down is a separable phrasal verb. This means you can separate it with a pronoun. For example, turn it down or turn the offer down. Now let's hear a short dialogue using turn down in both of its meanings.
I heard you got a job offer from that big company. Did you accept it?
No, I turned it down. The salary was good, but the hours were too long.
I see. Sometimes it's better to turn down a job that doesn't fit your lifestyle. By the way, could you turn down the air conditioner? It's getting a bit cold in here.
Sure, no problem.
That dialogue shows how turn down can be used to both reject an offer and make the level of something lower, like the air conditioner.
Yes, and it's a very handy phrase. Lisa, do you think turn down is a common phrase in English?
It's used a lot in everyday conversations because we often need to talk about refusing something or lowering the volume. It's a very practical phrase to know.
I agree, and because it has two different meanings, it's useful in many different situations. You can use it in both formal and informal settings, depending on the context.
Yes, so just remember, if you want to refuse something, you can turn it down. And if you want to lower something like sound or heat, you can also turn it down.
Exactly. Well, that's all for the word turn down.
Yes, and now it's time to explain the last word of today. What is the last word today, Eric?
The last word today is the last straw.
The last straw.
The last straw. The last straw is an idiom, and it means that it is the final problem that caused them to lose patience or decide to take action. When someone says, "This is the last straw," it means that they can't take it anymore.
Exactly, Eric. So, the last straw is the last thing that makes a person feel enough is enough.
That's a good explanation, Lisa. Now, let's give 2 example sentences to help everyone understand it better. Here's my example. When he shouted at me for no reason, it was the last straw. I quit my job. It means that the person had been already unhappy for a while, but the shouting was the final problem that made them decide to leave their job.
Here's another example. When the car broke down again, it was the last straw for him, and he decided to buy a new one. It means that after many problems with the car, the latest breakdown was the final issue that made him decide to get a new car.
Good one, Lisa. Now, let's give a short dialogue to show how the last straw can be used in conversation.
I've been trying to be patient, but when she left the kitchen a mess again, it was the last straw.
I can't blame you. If that happened to me, it would be the last straw too. What are you going to do?
I'm going to ask her to move out. I just can't take it anymore.
That was a good example, Eric. It shows how the last straw is used when someone can't take any more problems. Do you think it is a common idiom, Eric?
Yes, Lisa, it's a very common idiom when people are frustrated or upset, and in both spoken and written English. What do you think?
Well, Eric, I think the last straw is useful because it helps express strong emotions. When someone is really fed up or has had enough, this phrase explains that feeling perfectly. Also, it is easy to remember because you can imagine a camel carrying a lot of straws, until one last straw makes it too heavy.
That's a good way to think about it, Lisa. So, listeners, the last straw is the final problem that causes you to take action.
Well, I think we have reached the end of our podcast today. Thanks for listening to Simply Explained English. We hope you found today's words helpful.
See you in the next episode with more simple English explanations.
Bye for now.